Welcome back. It's been a month since I introduced my garden in my last video, and since then it's been going really well. I've been doing a lot of work in the garden, and I'm looking forward to showing it to you. In addition, I've been doing a lot of reading on the internet, of course, on wood chips and using wood chips in the garden, as well as hugelkultur. The hugelkultur is a longer term experiment. I don't really expect to see any significant results from the hugelkultur beds over the other beds for a while, until at least the wood begins to really rot and contribute, moisture holding and nutrient value to the soil. The wood chips, on the other hand, are showing some pretty immediate benefits. First of all, weeds. They smother the crap out of weeds. I haven't had any weed problems. And second of all, soil moisture is retained really well. You can really tell if you just dig down just below the surface, everything is moist and looks good, and plants seem to be doing really well. So that is encouraging, and I'm going to keep at it and see how it goes. Check it out. In this first bed, this is a hugelkultur bed, mulched with wood chips. I planted spinach and lettuce, and then I planted peas along the back, which have all come up, parsley on the end, and I interplanted leeks in between all the lettuces there and the spinach as a longer term crop. Those are done, and on the end there I've got a little squash. This bed last time, I think, was bare. I had just pulled out the turnips and other cover veggies that I had over the winter, and now I've planted corn. I've got a little squash there. I've got a strawberry on the end, Brussels sprout at random, and then a bunch more strawberries there along the edge, and 2 tomatoes on the end. I did interplant the corn with edamame beans, hoping those will come up and do well. I don't know if it gets hot enough. These corn here are nursery bought. I planted some seed corn that was a little too old and it didn't come up, along with some other squash, and this is the only squash that came up. I just had a box of seeds that were sitting around for I don't know how many years, and I'm not surprised they didn't all come up. So this corn is a longer ripening variety, I think 90 days, and then in the next bed I've got a shorter ripening variety to stagger the corn harvest, hopefully, and prevent cross-pollination. This bed here is maybe got the most going on in it. There's the tree collard, or tree kale, which is going bananas. There's a couple of Russian kale going to seed. I'm going to save those. Got a Brussels sprout on the end, another tomato on the other end. The short season corn, 60 days I think to ripening, interplanted in there with some beans, pole beans, and a couple more squash of variety I don't remember. Here's the Brussels sprouts bed. Brussels sprouts are doing quite well. Get pretty big. No sprouts yet. Not due for a while to show sprouts, I think. And then the Inca berry on the end is doing really well. Putting on a lot of vegetative growth and quite a few flowers. Haven't seen any fruit yet. And then just like the lettuce, I've interplanted some leeks, mostly just because I had them. And I planted peas along the back to take advantage of the fence. They're all up and they're doing well. And then strawberries. Planted a lot more strawberries. 4 different kinds in total now. And they are planted along the edges of the beds in various locations. Here's the artichokes. These guys are doing really good. I'm letting the fava beans go to seed here. I'm going to collect those, eat some of the beans, and save some for next year. The chard is still I decided to leave it, let it go to flower and collect the seeds. I'm still eating some of the leaves. Another artichoke on the end, and you can see how good these fava beans are doing. Here's a view of the whole garden area, but thanks to Stefan, my now garden partner, we have more than doubled the size of the garden. Not all of these beds are hugelkultur. Some are double dug. These three here in view are double dug beds, and then there's a few more hugelkultur beds at the top there, and I'll show you around some of those beds. So this series of beds here are hugelkultur beds. They're all dug out down to about a foot and then filled in with wood, filled back in with soil, and mulched on top with wood chip. Here along the fence, we've got two different kinds of beans. Down here in front, this bed is planted with potatoes, some fingerling potatoes, 3 different colors, and then some bok choy on top to as a quick crop while the potatoes are establishing themselves. Potatoes are starting to sprout, and they seem pretty healthy and vigorous. And then on the south and west side of this bed is another row of strawberries to take advantage of those edges. You can see the artichokes there. Cut a hole through the fence there to access from the old garden. This bed is just weed area that I've laid down cardboard to smother and then laid dirt on top. Mulched it again with wood chips and planted a couple squash and cucumber, sunflower, and an eggplant. We'll see how they do. Yeah, another sort of a control against the hugelkultur. We'll be able to compare how they do versus a more standard version of a raised bed. This main double bed here in the center of the garden is double dug, no hugelkultur, mulched again, and planted with all kinds of stuff. We got beans, haven't come up yet, just planted seeds. We've got melon, cucumber, we've got a giant sunflower or two, we've got a volunteer corn, we've got pumpkins, we've got onions, and calendula along the edge. Also wanted to talk real quick about the pathways in the new garden. Just like the old garden, whether these beds are hugelkultur or not, the pathways have been dug out to about a foot deep in order to raise the beds. All the soil's been used to raise the beds, and then the paths have been refilled with wood chip. And because this is a slope, not a very steep slope, but a slope nonetheless, the beds are more or less built on contour, so they're flat. And the main pathways, running north-south in this case, are also on contour, and they've been dug out, but not all the way around the beds. The trench sort of stops at either end of the bed and then picks up again at the next pathway down the hill. So this sort of makes a double contour trench with these two pathways here, and then in the future a third pathway on the downhill side of this last bed. And I'm hoping that this is a happy accident and that it will encourage rainwater to catch in these trenches underneath this chip and hold it back from draining down the hillside before it has a chance to percolate and sort of recharge the groundwater in these beds. So we'll see how that goes. In general, I think the wood chips rotting is going to turn into, one giant sponge, and it's going to hold a lot of water anyway. But I think this just increases that water holding capacity and reduces again the potential for erosion. And as far as I'm mentioning water, I'll mention that really, other than seeds like the carrots and the parsnips and the radishes on the top of this last bed, I have not done any watering. None of these transplants have been watered other than the first day they were put in. The lettuce hasn't been watered in a month, other than one rain that we had come through. None of those more established plants have been watered other than the rain, and they all seem to be doing really well. So I'm really encouraged by this whole mulching approach, and even though the mulch is only a couple inches thick, it really seems to do wonders for water holding capacity and keeping the soil moist just below the surface of the mulch. You can already see mycelium growing in it. You can see the roots exploring it, and you can tell that the plants they don't even wilt in the heat of the day when we do get a warm day, even though it's still early in the spring. So I'm really curious to see how that goes, how the water situation plays out here.